Hi, and welcome back to the Life in Bomb City podcast. I'm Aaron Favor.
And I'm Dr. Beth Rodriguez.
And we are coming to you live today from the FM 90 Panhandle PBS studios right here in the Texas Panhandle at Amarillo College.
Yes, gosh, I can't believe it's been a year.
That's right. It's been over a year, and we represent the Social and Behavioral Sciences Department. So we have a lot of things to talk about today.
We do. Just kind of catching up on the different things that we've been through during this whole pandemic, which we probably could share with a lot of people because I know that a lot of experiences are probably very similar. Yet we do have our individual struggles that people are going through. And I think it's going to be really interesting just to see as we are transitioning back to what we consider to be normal.
Definitely. And in the classroom, we're getting ready to have in-face classes again.
Oh, so excited about that.
We've been online for over a year. It's been a learning experience. There is nothing more educational than being completely jarred from your reality and being tossed into a whole nother world where, I mean, you may have been to some degree acclimated to some of it, but not permanently.
Right.
And that's pretty much what we were doing, I guess, for the last year.
Yeah. Again, it was one of those things that we thought we would, it was something we had to do at that time, but who knew it was going to last that long?
Yeah. Who could have predicted that? I think in November of 2019, we were talking in my Texas government class, and then we began continuing that conversation over because I thought it was interesting, all of the scientists that were disappearing in China at that particular time in the Wuhan province. Mm-hmm. And they were trying to get word out, and they were putting it on YouTube and other social media. And they kept disappearing. And I thought this was really weird. But that was the beginning of a conversation that we ended up having over a long extended period of time. Mm-hmm. And that leads into the new year and what we would consider to be the beginning of the global aspect of it. Not saying that China covered it up, okay? Not saying that, just saying that they were disappearing doctors, and that was a little bit strange, especially at the very beginning. But anyway, outside of that, what has been going on inside your world?
Oh my goodness. So of course, we talked about, we had all of our students transition to basically like a Zoom class. So everybody was online, and that was a huge change. I am such a people person in my class. Let's have this discussion. And we lost that. And that was a big transition. And then of course I have 3 kids. So, after spring break of last time, they were home. They were home. And so not only was I doing my stuff, we were doing their things and, trying to keep them busy, but not around people. It was a really different thing. And then we finally got back into sports, and my oldest, his 8th grade year, broke his ankle, couldn't play his football year. And then his last year in middle school. And then recently, my middle one just broke his ankle.
Oh, man.
And we are still dealing with sports things, which we love. And, just life in general. And, there's a lot of new initiatives that have been coming into the college. There is a new movement, which I'm sure a lot of people have heard about, which is the anti-racism movement, just because of all the controversy with the George Floyd incident and, the following incidents that happened afterwards. And we were lucky enough to be invited to have these conversations with people. And so Aaron
you invited me into that group.
I did. And I just needed, I think that, we talk about allies. Everybody's talking about allies. And in the group that, I felt like I needed a little bit more of an ally, somebody not necessarily that's going to fully agree with me because we don't, but somebody who, had same kind of the moral standing and values that I'm coming from. And so, yes, I definitely had and said, we need this guy because he's not only has some of the morals and values that I have, which I do, but also because he is a policy guy. And this is, from what I was understanding with our anti-racism committee here at Amarillo College, we were really looking at changing these major policies to get rid of all racism.
Mm-hmm. That's right. And in addition to that, I think that there's a whole list of different people that I think to some degree we have as a kind of a canon of reasonable thought that would agree with that. I think one of the most controversial probably would be Robert McNamara, the former Secretary of Defense during the Vietnam War, who said that, in his claimed documentary, The Fog of War, said that if you can't convince people that are of similar reason, maybe different cultures, but similar reason, and come from different places, then maybe it's time to re-examine your reasoning. And that's just a lesson that he had learned from Vietnam, in which he had gotten put into kind of this upper echelon echo chamber of what he was believing about the war and about the way they were fighting the war and about the optimistic values of the war and what they were trying to achieve, and they got lost in everything. And it became an incredibly complex. And if you talk to people that fought in Vietnam or people that were making policy during Vietnam out of the DOD, anybody that was working for the State Department at that time, they will say everything had to be qualified. And there is absolutely nothing that didn't need more qualification. Yeah. So I kind of find us in a similar position, and not only through the pandemic, but the pandemic also created an umbrella under which other things could happen that maybe wouldn't have had the social force if we weren't all sitting at home watching the news. And
watching social media and, everything that's being put out on Twitter and whatever else. I think that, it was like the epidemic led into the media and social media and people posting on social media having more control than they ever did before, because we are very reliant on it. Because what else were we doing? Exactly. Right? We talk, everybody was, reading books and singing songs, which, was a beautiful thing that came from the ability to have social media so that could happen. But then it also gave people who had a voice on something a platform where people were almost not necessarily forced, but, they were very captive. And therefore, even if it was something that was way out there, could definitely have some followers. And I think that was something that wouldn't have happened if we didn't have COVID. I think that if that whole situation didn't happen, I don't think it would have led to that I don't think it would have been that same kind of reaction that we're seeing now.
It's an interesting statement. I think that for sure, that first month particularly, I remember clinging to the musicians that I listen to, that I love, and all of the covers that they were doing. Yeah. All these musicians were supporting each other. And people forget that that's a very tight-knit community, even though they may hate on each other.
Right.
A lot of times, whenever it comes down to economic disparity and economic, despair, just they have a tendency to really get behind each other. And
we are the world. Remember that?
And the children.
Yes, that whole thing where people were like, okay, we know there's something going on. People do value music. And so it's like, wouldn't that be a perfect place for us to really bring up what's going on? And I think you're absolutely right. I think it's really neat how that works.
In future conversations, I think that it does deserve an entire portion of to devote to. I think that we are probably going to need to invite somebody from either the health department or somebody from the Center for Disease Control or something along those lines, maybe one of these doctors that have been on the front lines, to visit about the culture that's kind of been created as a result of COVID as well, that is a medical culture, that is also a social culture. And I think to some degree, you as a social psychologist probably speak to some of our friends and our relatives that have really been, I believe, traumatized by this, including our children.
Oh, I 100%. My biggest thing is we constantly have this isolation. And the biggest group I think really suffered from it would be the first time the people who just got into college, because they have these expectations, and all of a sudden, they're in between. Like, what am I supposed to be doing? And some of them have moved out. And not only, there's going to be an adjustment from moving out from your family in the first place. Now you've moved out and now you're isolated. And we know, if just from history, isolation is not a cure. I can't think of the word. That is a punishment. I was like, yeah, it's a word. It is a punishment to be isolated, right? We talk about that. People don't, even though we do have people who are, considered introverts still like to be around people. That's a very big misconception that it's only extroverts, but introverts we are social creatures as humans. So during this isolation, we saw an increase in so many mental health issues, anxiety, stress, depression. Because all comes from the idea of fear, because it was a very scary situation, but also from isolation and the fact that nobody knew. The uncertainty is a horrible, horrible factor on people and their mental health.
Yeah, and in addition, and I guess from the policy angle, the other side of that coin is that the question of overreaction or underreaction. I'm very sympathetic to and empathetic to our leaders. I cannot imagine what kinds of conversations were taking place in some of those different closed rooms. And, saying things like it took place in a closed room sounds like it's anti-democracy or anti-republicanism. And I would argue against that. I would say that we elect people specifically to hold trust so that they can go into that room, represent our interests, whether we like it or not. And we always have the opportunity to take them out of office when they don't. So anybody that's listening, don't send us mail and don't throw tomatoes at us if you see us on the street. That's a value that I share with you. However, I also want to put out there as an extra thing to think about that, the people that are in there, they're talking to all the professionals that we're listening to. And there's been, which leads to a whole other topic and maybe another episode, which is the discrediting of some of the medical community and what doctors have done and what they've said has turned out to be, because they're operating on the fly, I would argue not dissimilar to some of the ways that we have had to interact with national security threats in the past, like 9/11, where people start poking holes in the arguments because they're making the best decisions they can at the time. And then it comes back that wasn't true, right? We found out that we shouldn't be wearing masks. That's okay. And now Dr. Fauci is religious about wearing masks. The discrediting of Dr. Fauci as an example as well. And we have a new president as well. So that is I
love that.
What a year.
Yes.
People compared it to 1968 and to, something like a major transitional year. I have a tendency to disagree with that. And the reason I do, those were exceptional years for different reasons. When we go back and we look at public health as a security issue, it was 1917, 1918, and 1919, the Spanish flu pandemic, which would be considered racist today. To call it the Spanish flu pandemic, I think it's still okay to call it that. Maybe
that's the name of it. So
yeah, in my mind, it's a lot of people think it was the H1N1 bug. It probably is the H1N1 bug, and I'm sure there's some health official that's like, it was.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%, Aaron, and don't call it the swine flu ever. That's what. That would be something that would be argued. That's a political thing, and it ended up having 10,000 pigs slaughtered in Egypt back in 2010 or 2011. Anyway, so I guess the bigger issue there is that when we start having these comparisons that go on with other years, maybe we've had some type of an imagination where we wonder what it would be like to live through one of those years.
Right.
But someday we need to remember that the people will look back on this year and they'll say, well, wow, what a year to be alive. Maybe I'll feel differently if I'm blessed to live to be 80 years old. But right now I am, and I feel like there was a certain amount of health, thankfulness and gratefulness that I need to say, because I know there were a lot of lives lost and a lot of people that lost their family members.
And this is one of those situations in which I'm not discrediting the personal trauma that's happening. And but a lot of times when what was happening, because the social media and everybody was home, this personal trauma was brought to the forefront to seen as more of a catastrophe. And it was. I'm not saying, I'm not discrediting the loss of life, because never is it okay. It's not great. I'm not like, oh, well, it's only 4,000 people. Any loss is awful, because there is a personal impact to somebody. But what I'm saying is that, because people had such a voice during this time through social media and different things like that, their personal tragedy became more of a political, more country kind of thing, where, it's very possible that it could have happened and we might not have known about it. And therefore, you and I necessarily wouldn't be responsible for something that happened in Indiana. You know what I'm saying? Right. But because of, how much was shared and how much was reported through the news and the media, it now became a world responsibility. It's very difficult. And we know if we really started reporting every death, not just COVID, I think people would realize, oh my gosh, that is a situation that we could not fathom, we could not function with, because we would constantly be worried that someone's going to die. And the sad thing is that people are. And it's, it's something that everybody's going to have to deal with. And I'm not just, not I'm not skating over the fact that it was a big deal, because it is a big deal. But what I'm saying is that if we didn't have as much reporting from the media and everything, it might not have been as commercialized almost.
Right. The term REBT is awfulized, catastrophized, and there was a lot of that thinking that was going on instead of minding the potholes in the alley.
Yeah.
And I always, as somebody that does believe that the place where we see the government the most is in our local community, it really facilitates a conversation about our Amarillo Community College, what we're doing, our initiatives in the future, all the different things that we do. We believe everything comes out of the individuals acting within the community that cause societal impact. Mm-hmm. And I think it can be argued with quite a bit of evidence, and I'd like to provide some of that. Right now, the claim might be that, with the economic crisis, right, that was faced as a result of COVID-19, I can understand the different needs for closures and shutting down and all of the different things that we have going on, and I have a deep sympathy. We've had family members of our own who died from complications developed by COVID-19. On the other hand, and there's always seems to be kind of like another approach to it. There's also the opportunity to address other concerns that might be present in American society. So the idea of awfulizing and catastrophizing was, you can almost argue, hey, do it. Go do it as much as you can. And it seemed to be cradled in a way, like, you need to be doing this. You need to go into this state of, and I was susceptible to that at the very, very, then I've wanted to focus on my family.
Right. And that's kind of that's what it really is about. Like, if as individuals, we try to fix the world, God, that is so stressful because the truth, even, I can do my part every 5 seconds, but if somebody's next to me that's not, it's like, and I can't control what anybody else is doing. I can only control my actions and my responses. And that's really what we did is we decided, okay, we have some choices here and we can, try to do everything, or I can be with my family. And that's really what we did. And, we were really lucky because during, when everybody was locked down during the summer, a lot of people, we weren't. We were playing baseball. We were traveling. And I know people are like, oh my God, I can't believe you went to hotel. But my mom, she's the best. My mom made sure I had a hotel travel bag that had Lysol spray, Lysol wipes, a big, huge, like refillable thing of hand sanitizer with 2 small things of hand sanitizer, and then a medium one that we could keep in the room. I mean, it was like, and she's like, make sure you spray the phone, the door handles, the remote control, the lamp, all the things. And we did. And it was a constant, like doing that. And as I'm doing it, I'm like, why am I just doing this now? This should be something, if I'm really that worried, then this should have been something I'm doing the whole time, because it's not like all of a sudden germs appeared when COVID did.
Right.
Like they've been here. And, and then all these places like, well, we're wiping down the tables now. And it's like, well, what? Like, shouldn't you be doing that already? But, it really did just it just made me realize how important my family is. And close friends. And, it just made you realize that, again, it's bringing to light the idea that life is not promised, right? You cannot. Right. I'm not saying tomorrow you're going to be here. So you have to, go out, do the things you want to do, make sure you're, around the people you want to be around, and that you are having a good time and showing the love and the care and the respect, because you just don't know. And it's not, COVID was definitely a reminder, but this is like every day.
Right.
Like this is just one of those things that kind of was like a slap in the face, like wake up, remember this could happen to anybody at all times. So I'm hoping that it did allow people to reprioritize and decide, okay, this is really what's important to me, instead of, worrying about a lot of things that you can't control and worry about.
Yeah, Beth, I think that 100%. Okay, there was, I think, a point and we were like y'all. I think we got to April, somewhere around mid-April, and we started looking at options. We don't have a huge house, and we were in the backyard a lot. I began to be concerned about my son's mental health and his well-being as he's developing. And I'm very, very much aware that, as we're recording this, he might be able to listen to this later as a full-grown man or, a teenager growing up. And I want him to know that his parents were thinking about those things during this time, that his development, his personal growth, all of those different things. I don't want to disclose anything that might become embarrassing to him later, or keep him from getting the girls or whatever. But at the same time, he like so many other kids have now grown up for a year in one of the most formative times in their lives, wearing nothing but masks anytime they go out, and being essentially afraid of germs or essentially afraid of viruses. And that's what they've gotten since they've been back to school. Mm-hmm. I think we can make an argument. I think we're leaving out the collective good and the individual good and the balance that has to be created there. But that the worldviews that we come out of often shape the policies that we pursue, not only as individuals, which have great societal impact, and the policies that affect the collective, which have great societal impact. And they talk to each other kind of like a married couple, mm-hmm. And so our worldview, and I have to give a disclaimer, I'm not trying to proselytize to anyone, nor am I trying to convert anyone, but our family is Catholic. And our worldview revolves around one thing, that we are not in control. God is in control, that there is sovereignty in God, and trust and faith in God leads to prosperity, not success and prosperity as we may be thinking about it in terms of monetary wealth, but family, good in orientation. It's a center for our family. It's a place where we go twice a day and give thanks for the day. And that's it. Like you said, day to day and day to day. And that's a very, in my mind, an important distinction to be made between, and this is not to say any of the things that are going to be said, because people can take things out of context and use one thing that's being said and then come at you and try to attack you based on a straw man. And of course, that's a fallacy, an argument, but this is all recorded, so do it and I'm going to hit you right back.
Yeah.
So the point is that it doesn't mean that the policymakers themselves don't have that worldview or don't come from it, but they're coming into meetings with that worldview and then making policy decisions and having discussions out of that worldview, and that has societal impact from a great degree. People that don't come out of that worldview, that they're not essentially in control, and that people can't control everything, it leads to, and we do have a new president, and I'm not slamming the new presidential administration. I don't want to do that. However, last night or the night before last, he did give his first address to Congress in which he said, "We the people is we the government." And that is an interesting thing for us to talk about.
Yeah.
We the people is we the government. Maybe, I mean, right after I heard it, I was like, I need to think about this for a second, because you know me, I've got to kind of like,
always.
I got to process it a little bit, right? Because I want to try to understand. If he's right, he's right. And if I'm wrong, then I want to know that I'm wrong,
right,
so that I can correct my thinking and rationalize it in a way that's correct, in my mind anyway. And so when he said that, I thought, maybe this stems from some type of an increased amount of trust, or the sense of being told what to do for so long, that now it's okay to say that maybe what we've wanted to say for quite a while, our friends and our colleagues and our people that we share this world with and our statehood with, that there is a possibility that if we think hard enough, and if we just debate long enough, and if we just can science it enough, then we can control the events around us. And I just don't think that's right.
I don't either. I really, like I said, I mean, it's an individual. I can talk to you all day long and try to convince you and get you. But the truth is, the only thing I really can control is my response and my emotion so it's all about me. This is the things I can control. I can't even control my kids, which is, that's questionable. However, I mean, it's the truth. I mean, they have their own thinking. And even though, I try to hopefully give them lots of experience to have their own, control of themselves, everybody has to realize that I cannot control what you do. I can't control what you think of me. I can't do that. Only thing I can do is my actions and my behavior. Mm-hmm. Okay. I know we're getting into serious, but before we move on, we were really talking about family. And in this new year again, Aaron has brought in a new member into his family. He has a new baby girl.
I do.
And she is beautiful.
She's gorgeous.
And one thing that, we were talking about with the mask, so his wonderful wife brought the baby, Rosie up, and we all got to see her, but I was sitting there and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, this poor baby has only seen everybody with mask on. So I immediately looked at Aaron and I said, hey, I don't want to have can I look at her and talk to her without my mask on? And he was like, absolutely. Because that is, I can't imagine what that would be like for the very first time you're in this world and you look at people and they all have masks on. And that's what you get used to. Like your first interaction with people other than your parents, because obviously your parents wouldn't have a mask on in front of you, but is with I think that is a scary, kind of even a like sci-fi type thing where I felt like personally responsible that I cannot allow this to happen because she's going to have to be able to see a whole face to understand the interaction between people. And that's really what I am worried, to tell you the truth. I'm a little bit worried about the young generation, the very young generation that has had this mask on and seen people with mask on for a full year. Because, I mean, a year in a kid's life of their development it's quite a bit, especially the younger you are. I mean, there's a lot of things that happen in that development in 1 year for infants and toddlers and even preschool children. So, I mean, it bothers me. Like, I'm worried that they're going to lose some of the social interaction and communication and verbal understanding because of the mask.
Right. Don't worry, though. Social media has got you covered.
You're right. But that even makes me a little bit more nervous, right? Is because they, again, I mean, I can control what my kids are watching to a point. You know, and kids are brilliant. We do not give them enough credit in their cognitive abilities.
Touché.
Because they'll find you can control as much as parental control, watch them all the time. Okay, there's somebody else who's going to see it. They just have this ability. And we have to be aware that even if you did everything you can do to control what your kids are seeing, they're still going to see stuff that you don't want them to see. It's going to happen. But that's where the parenting comes in and you talk to them. But I still think that, you know, I would love to see the research of what's happening with the social interactions, social communication, nonverbal facial expression for the generation that has lived a full year with mask.
You should apply for a grant of some sort, and you could do this in all your spare time that you have right now.
You know, I mean, I have the best intentions, great ideas. It's just the follow through, not always there because I do have a little bit on my plate.
Right.
My kids are all playing. Adrena and I are about to do private tennis lessons together.
Oh, fun.
And we got a puppy. Oh my gosh. You know what? I don't know. I love him. He's fantastic. He's a dachshund, which I never would have gotten. I always get big, like burly dogs that are crazy and, you know, just outside and big and bark. And then now we have this teeny tiny little dachshund, and his name's Oliver. He's amazing. But I know that it was like the worst time ever. I haven't even told my mom that I got a puppy because I know what she's going to be like. Are you kidding? You are so busy. And I was like, I figure the more I put on my plate, the more I get done, but that's not always true.
Yeah. Well, I mean, having a new baby, even being at the hospital when she was born, you know, there were certain questions that we were asking, like, do we need to be wearing masks? I mean, does my wife need to be wearing a mask when in the birthing process? What's the deal here? And of course, they seem to be very, very relaxed. And by the way, I've got to give credit. We were at Northwest Hospital, and the first time we had our first kid, he was born at BSA, and they did a tremendous job. This time, she was born at Northwest, and I gotta give them a lot of credit. There was a couple of different nurses, but one specifically named Charity, who did a phenomenal job. She assists on flights that are emergency rescue flights. She's on the flight team, on the flight crew. I actually thought that when she came in and she had a tag on that said flight crew, I thought that was some type of a play on words, like, hey, I'm part of the flight crew. I'll be with you during this flight and take off and when we land, when the baby's here. No, that wasn't it. It was a very much a real deal. And she was incredible. And it was people like that, you know, that were able to understand the difference when it's appropriate and when it's inappropriate to wear things like that and to do the social distancing. Sometimes people need our help, and we have to break those rules in order to help them. And I think doctors understand this to a great extent. I think we could probably say with, I don't know what percentage, and I wouldn't want to make one up. But certainly there's a certain number. Teachers understand this as well. And here at Amarillo College, with our culture of caring and the things that we saw our students going through, words can't explain how many times I wanted to step through the screen and, pat somebody on the back or, shake their hand, especially on the first day of class, getting to know people, letting them know that everything was going to be okay. And sometimes just hearing those words means the world. So that's been difficult for the last year because I think both of us share this in common, that we build personal relationships with our students, sometimes that last for decades. And I don't want any of that to have gone away because this was such a unique experience to grow closer to students. And to assist each other. They help us just like we help them in some ways because they give us a boots on the ground type of, some of our students were working throughout the pandemic.
Yes.
And I mean, in jobs where they interacted and interfaced with the public on a day-to-day basis, some people that were opening the grocery stores, the people that typically you would think would not be categorized as first-line responders, are categorized now in that group of individuals that we were like, thank you. You know, I don't know if thank you for your service is is in place there, but certainly thank you for showing up.
Right.
And not letting your fear overwhelm your reason and your principle to the degree that you decided not to show up to work because this is so needed.
Right.
People have to have food. Thank you.
Absolutely. I agree with you. And it was definitely a time where, we had individuals who stepped up that probably didn't even realize they were doing it. They were just doing what they've always done. I go to work. But their working actually made and would be a huge impact if they didn't show up. And I think that, sometimes sometimes when you do something, you don't realize it because it's just what you've always done until there is a crisis or something. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, okay, but this is what I've always done. So I don't really expect that from anybody. But at the same time, it's like, I think they need to hear it. Like thank you to all the people who did show up that we were, we needed the truck drivers, right? What?
Oh, man.
That farmers, I'm anybody that had to do with the whole process of getting food so people could eat because ranchers.
Thank you, ranchers.
Thank you. I mean, there's so many people that you just don't think, but in the line of it, they were still working when a lot of people were not. And if you weren't working, not because, for the most part, not because anybody wanted to, like nobody wanted to stop working, but there were some places that you just didn't have the ability to go to work anymore, but you still need food. You still need drinking water. You still need electricity. You still need, right, all of these things. So I think that, some of the people that we don't necessarily give thanks to on a regular basis needed it. And we were, all of a sudden, it opened our eyes to how much they were an essential part to the whole society and to our living. So,
right.
Thank you.
Yeah. And liquor stores as well. Although our friends in the bartending industry were not being able to open for some social distancing reasons, which caused great economic, hardship on them. It's understandable from a public health perspective and that policies that were being implemented on that side. But from the standpoint of the individual and societal impact, not being able to pay their bills, not being able to have the dignity that a job gives us.
Absolutely.
The self-accomplishment, the fulfillment that we get out of getting to see and socialize with other people. All of those things are things that we can identify with, surely, and understand also that the liquor stores remained open. I had no earthly idea that liquor stores would remain open until I got to thinking about the other side of that. And it made a lot of sense to keep the liquor stores open.
Yeah.
I think we talk about that. I think in our social sciences, we have something to say about it.
Sure. So. Absolutely. Always. Yeah, I'm just, again, it feels great to be able to be doing this again. I mean, and we talked about it a lot coming back and, getting a podcast talking about during the pandemic, because I know that there's a lot of people who would have, benefited from just having a podcast that identified and, sympathized and, that you could feel like, oh yeah, they get it. And, but we didn't have the opportunity. It was crazy. There may been a couple of opportunities, but our lives were we were influenced just as much. And a lot of people don't, sometimes you're like, oh, well, certain people, they don't have to. But everything was a lot different. So I'm just glad that we are finally back and we can start talking about a lot of different things. I'm excited about this. I guess, I don't know, we're calling it season or year
right.
Of podcasts that we're going to be, putting out, because we're going to be tackling a lot of different and really intense, but also fun and hopefully, I don't know, just good things that people can relate to and understand that, we're here and we get it. And we want to know, we want you guys to, be a part of some of the really intense conversations that we have had that are going around in the country, but also understand that we still want to have some fun and we still want you guys to be along and listening and being like, you know what, now I'm going to have a good day. So I'm just excited that we're back.
We're back.
We're back.
We're back. So also to go back to a previous topic, we were talking a little bit about the anti-racism work that our college is taking on. It's a little bit beyond poverty. It's a little bit beyond our culture of caring, although it's a part of it. I mean, it's an intimate and intricately part and wound up in the culture of caring.
I think in all of it, it really is. I think there was a good way that we were talking about. It's an extension of the culture of caring. So it's not a new creature. It is an extension to what we were doing already.
Right. I needed to go into and start reading. And so I read, I hadn't read this yet. And now I think that it's kind of a cult classic, if you will, Ibram Kendi's How to Be an Anti-Racist. Also a cult classic now, which is White Fragility, why white people have a hard time talking about race and racism, and what Cornel West has to say about the subject. And some of the, I'm not trying to in any way, create division. That's not what I'm trying to do, nor is it something that I ever try to do. But the fact that there's differences of opinion in the community of people who believe that racism does need to be tackled, and in the approaches that people believe that they take and the way that they socially construct their worldviews, I think is very important for us to, maybe we can talk about it a little bit.
I would love to do a whole podcast on that.
We could do a series on it.
I do. I mean, it is, we've both been in conversations with many other people about different things on race. And, it is, for some people, it really is a hard topic to talk about. And I really think that it depends on how you come into the conversation. If you came into a conversation thinking you are completely right and everything they have is wrong, that's going to be a very tense, highly, maybe even volatile, aggressive kind of conversation. But if you come in understanding, like, you know what, I don't know everything. I want to learn. And, you have somebody who's in that same realm that understands that they also, doesn't matter where you come, you do not know everything. And, together you're experiencing the idea and the conversation. I think it lends towards a better conclusion. And it's never going to be over. So I don't necessarily love the conclusion part, but at the same time, the conversation is going to be a better conversation. And, and instead of having like an extremist side, there is, anytime you look at almost everything that we talk about, when we have the extremes, we have what we call confirmation bias. we have where you only see your side and you discredit everything else. And with that extreme, it really makes people not want to hang out.
Mask shaming.
Yeah.
That was going on during in the big stores whenever they were still open. Like
mask shaming, the vaccination, policy, political, race, everything. It's very, when we have the extremes, it's you can't communicate because no one's listening. We're not open when you're in the extremes.
Eventually we also need to talk about police. And policing.
Gosh, yes.
There's so many different things, forces on the move with regard to policing and talking about what police do, what they deal with on a day-to-day basis. Is there racism systemically within policing, and having a conversation with not only police, but people that might be watchdogs or maybe want to have a conversation with police about the way that they go about doing their job. Maybe we could even facilitate some ride-alongs.
Right. That would be fun.
Yeah, if that was possible.
I know, maybe. And we could do like the live mic phones while we're in it. Right. But one thing I was just going to bring up, because we're going to try to bring up current stuff that's happening right now. And there was, in California, there was a student and a professor talking about the police. And they were talking, the student was really upset about the cancel culture. We're going to talk about that for a while as well, through different podcasts, I'm sure, but the cancel culture. And he was saying that people want to cancel Paw Patrol. Have you heard this?
Yeah, I have.
Because it portrays cops in a good, positive way.
Right.
And he was like, well, the truth is cops are heroic. They show up to places that other people don't. When you need help, that's who you call. And the professor adamantly disagreed with him. And it's a conversation I think that people need to have. And I don't know that it should have been, I don't think it's anybody's place to tell somebody else that they're wrong on their opinion. No matter what. I think that I can definitely tell you my opinion, but I'm not going to tell you you're wrong and then I'm right. I'm one thing that with that, because he did say, that cops, there are a lot of cops that are heroes. Police can be heroes. Absolutely. The professor responded by saying all of them. And of course he responded and said, well, maybe not all of them, but there's bad people in all professions. It's not just like there's this enormous amount of people that are cops that are horrible people. Right. And that's really what he said. And she disagreed. And I have a problem when people say that just doesn't make any sense, because it's not true, because you cannot, there's no way. I can't say all things are this, because it's not. We're going to find somebody who's not. So that's a false statement.
Right. Just kind of like saying LOL after every now and then on your, on social media, or having some type of, an emoji that has like the tears because you're laughing so hard. I don't believe that every single time I see that, people are actually crying because they're laughing so hard.
Right.
That would give me a misimpression of and it would prevent me from fully understanding what people are getting, what they're not getting. And so maybe that's something that we should think about in terms of, and reflect on when we're giving people feedback, is that LOL, laughing out loud all the time, isn't necessarily laughing out loud all the time, but rather just a response.
Right.
Saying 100%, I gotcha. Those are just signs of affirmation that maybe, not should be taken like, oh, they agree with me absolutely, therefore, and draw a conclusion. Yeah. That leads us down a different type of road. Particularly if that person holds political power, and is easily swayed by those types of statements. We do have a new president, and I've got a list of some things that that we just now had 100 days. There was a rally in Georgia a couple of days ago, and so I wouldn't mind visiting a little bit about that.
Okay, you guys, can you believe it's been 100 days? What?
I can't.
Okay, I think that the more we get back to normal, right? By the time you can't see me, but I'm totally doing the air quotes because I don't know what's normal anymore. But it's like the faster the time goes. We're already in May. Is it May yet? Well, not yet, but we're there.
We're close.
And I was shocked it was already April and now it's already May. It's like, what is happening? And I think that the fact that you just said it's been 100 days, I'm like, what? Seriously? Okay, so let's see. What are some of the things that, were brought up?
Okay, so Operation Warp Speed under the Trump administration, in which we took private industries, pharmaceutical industries, big pharma, asked them to come up with vaccines and asked them to do it as fast as possible. So they're testing the vaccines at the same time that they're producing them, knowing that there's going to be a lot of wasted spending at times, and there's going to be failures and things of that nature. But that the government was going to intervene, and we can have a long conversation about when it's appropriate maybe for governments to intervene. There's no silver bullet or a right answer on this. I mean, life is the same way. When is it okay to intervene in your child's life and interrupt somebody, or maybe somebody that is that's an alcoholic that needs somebody to step in? When is the appropriate time to do that? Well, it's hard to tell, and it depends.
It's relative to the situation.
That can't be true.
Yeah.
Nothing is like that in life. There are no mitigating circumstances.
Always.
However, at the same time, this kind of brings up an interesting point. We did end up getting we as America, is that we did get the vaccines. Not only did we get the vaccines, we've got a list of vaccines to choose from. So people that choose to get vaccines and get vaccinated have a kind of a plethora. Every time I think of plethora, I think of Three Amigos.
Oh my gosh, the plethora of piñatas.
So we have a plethora of piñatas to choose from in terms of vaccinations, and so that's an interesting little outcome. I may be wrong, and I would like to know if I am. I don't know that that's ever happened before.
I would probably, I'm going to go with probably not. I mean, immediate, I constantly, people who have been, dealing with, they need a drug, they need this. And, it was important to people living at that, in order to save their lives. Nobody's pushed anything this fast along to save lives as they have for COVID. Which, I think there's a good and a bad. There's pros and cons to both these. Yes, we're saving lives because of we're possibly saving lives because of the vaccine. Right. Okay, but, we've talked about this before. A lot of times when we have really good intentions, we do not know the side effects yet.
Right.
And there's always something that comes from it, more often than not. And, I've heard a lot of conversations of people who are like, wait, great, I'm glad you got the vaccine, but we don't know what's going to happen a year or 5 years from now. And, sure. the jokey, oh, we're going to hear a commercial that says, if you've taken the vaccine, here's the law office you can call. And, even though it's joking, it is kind of in people's minds like, how much testing has been done and, how much testing is normally done when we do vaccines and drugs, and how long does it take to, produce this, and how long did we do this? And, it's there's always going to be some pros and cons, and people, I think it's healthy. I think that is a healthy thing to happen when anything happens. There should be conversations of, it shouldn't be a full buy-in of, yeah, I'm going.
Well, if they had done that in the Cuban Missile Crisis, another example of a true emergency in which, some of the prevailing wisdom of military commanders at the time was to invade Cuba. Do it. Just go in and do it. Take them out. Take out the threat. But that wisdom was maybe a little bit antiquated, just a little bit. And with all the good, that's the job of the military, is to provide good, sound military policy and advice to the president. The president doesn't have to take the advice. The president can accept it. He can move on, as Kennedy did, and continue through a diplomatic channel, even if it's an unconventional diplomatic channel. interesting little conversation for us to be having.
Absolutely.
Something that I think about in terms of America is now that we have so many vaccines that are being produced and in production, now the rest of the world is looking at America, not saying, look at how terrible you are in your federal response to this. But now the criticism is, now you have a responsibility to the rest of the world to give all of the things that you guys have been working on for the last year, in an emergency response to provide to countries that cannot afford it. And I don't disagree that countries that have a great deal of economic disparity. We are a very wealthy country, and we have a lot to give, and we have a lot of farming and agriculture and oil and gas and all kinds of other things that we can help people out with. But this is one that I think can have some blowback if we're not careful.
Right.
So
what if?
Look what's going on in India right now. We could provide 100,000 vaccinations to India. Now, I think that their infection rate right now at this particular time, it's April 30th, Friday at 9:22 a.m., somewhere around 300 plus 400 million or 400,000 new infections reportable today. There's a lot of concern that that's a deeply undercounted number. That's an incredibly intense figure to deal with, right? So if out of that group of people, there is a 0.05% that are going to be susceptible, and that's not including the modern medicine the United States has. So maybe we can increase that percentage and just to include that factor and that little variable, big variable, and say that there's going to be a certain number of more deaths than significantly than what we saw even in America, that we have a responsibility to provide those vaccines to them. And then we find out 5 years, 6 years from now, that there is something else. Guess who's responsible for that?
Exactly.
Well, we are.
And
but
this totally comes
personal
down
accountability.
This comes down to the whole idea of pro-social behavior. When to decide if someone needs help, and then once you do, you've now become responsible for them. So even if you in your best intentions, and that's what your best intentions, I'm going to help. And then if something happens because of your help, that's on you. It's like, what do we do? Right. And I think that's a whole nother conversation we could have on this.
Wow. Okay. So we're coming up on an hour here. I know our listeners that are sitting on the treadmills or hopefully you're not sitting on the treadmill, but walking on the treadmills. Oh, which is a whole other conversation. Gyms, and gyms opening, gyms closing, gyms standing up to the government. Yeah. In certain cases, New Jersey, I believe.
Yes. All over,
right.
Different.
In addition to the movement to buy home gym equipment and just work out at home. All of that is another
Peloton and
how are we going to continue to be healthy and what kind of effect is this going to have on all those things? So we have a lot to look forward to, I think, in the upcoming season.
Yes.
This whole season, by the way, typically lasts about a fiscal year for us, which I think we started in March of 2018, maybe 2000.
I can't believe that.
Yeah, that's right. March of 2018, because it took about a semester to get this off the ground after you and I became friends. And that was, that was a thing. So fiscal year for our podcast is March. Typically, I believe they begin and end in September.
But not for us.
Not for us. So it's fiscal year.
It's like spring break, and then we're like, oh, what happened?
Maybe it's a podcast year.
There we go.
So it starts in March, ends in March. So it's a good way to remember it's spring break. So much love to our audience. Thank y'all so much for listening today.
Yes. And hey, if there's anything y'all want to talk about, let us know.
Please do. We've got a Facebook page. Go and like the page. Follow the page. We've got an Instagram feed. Go follow the feed, like it. Please reach out to us if you have an episode idea that you want us to,
or if you want to come on and be a guest.
Right?
We love some guests.
Look, if you want to be a guest on here and you think you've got something to say, let us know, and we'll be happy to visit with you. As long as it's courteous and it's polite social discourse, we're all in. So much love to everybody. God bless. And we will see you soon.
Yes, have a good one.
All right, bye.
Bye.